Welcome to the All Things Endurance podcast. I'm your host, Rick Prince, and I'm excited to have on the podcast today Laura Healey. Laura is a senior manager of research and sports science at Puma. And today, Laura and I will be talking about everything super shoes. This is obviously a pretty hot topic over the last few years. This is becoming more of a topic over cushioned shoes. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to chat with Laura today about this, given this is what she does for a living. So welcome to the show, Laura.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So maybe if you could give our listeners maybe a little bit more information about yourself, maybe a little bit of your education, kind of where you've worked up until Puma, and maybe kind of what you do at Puma.
Yeah, perfect. So as you mentioned, I'm the senior manager of research and sports science here at Puma, and I run our what we call the Nitro Lab. It's our performance testing lab, mainly around running. So before that, I am from Canada, so I did my undergrad and master's back in Canada, and have a master's in biomechanics. So I did that. And then I was out at the University of Massachusetts Amherst for a little bit, working with Dr. Wouter Hochheimer. And that's really when I started to focus on footwear specific and running specific biomechanics. When I joined him out there, we started doing some projects for Puma. I was doing some consulting for Puma. That's kind of how I got into footwear. And now I've been working at Puma for almost 5 years. So yeah.
Nice. Sounds kind of like I don't know, someone who's into footwear. It seems kind of like a dream job to be running that a lab. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been amazing. I think that's what, when I first was into biomechanics, it's really what caught my eye, wanting to do performance and wanting to do performance running, footwear research. So yeah, it's kind of been a dream, but it's been a wild ride, but it's been cool to have been with Puma and have kind of seen everything evolve over the past few years. It's been a very exciting few years to be a footwear biomechanist, I would say.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. So maybe we could first start off by talking about what is a super shoe. I think myself included maybe don't really understand. Is it we certainly know about the over cushion shoes. Is that what makes it super shoes? Is it, carbon plates? Is it like what is needed to be a super shoe? And maybe if you could also talk about if it's, if over cushion shoes don't necessarily make a super shoe, like maybe just some of the biomechanics on that as well, just over cushion shoes.
Yeah, it's a little bit it's evolving, which is the really interesting thing. I think, in 2017, the first super shoe and what changed what we define and why we called them super shoes was because it had three kind of new components, I would say. The first one is the carbon fiber plate, or a stiff agent, I would say. Even that has evolved, right? It's not always carbon fiber and it's not always a plate. But a stiffening agent in the shoe is kind of the first ingredient. Foam. So when we started, we often referred to this as PIBA. It was a lot of PIBA foams. Now that's even evolving. Different supercritical foam, which just means a foam that is very, very light, very compliant, and very resilient. So kind of this new era of excellent foams. And then the last thing that brings it all together is the geometry or the stack height. So we started to see the geometry go up. One, because foams were lighter, so we could afford more foam for less weight. And two, because that helps the carbon fiber plate be able to get its geometry. So the carbon fiber or stiff agent in the shoe is curved. And this can happen in turn because have more stack. So it's kind of those
Mm,
three things, and they all work in some way with each other. You can't really have one without the other. Um, of course, when you talk about over stacked shoes or really tall shoes, which we're also seeing, those don't, the one missing piece would be that they don't necessarily have a stiff thing in them. And they can still have this, super compliant, resilient foam and be really tall. So that they're sort of getting their own category now as what I would call super trainers.
okay.
Is sort of more, I would say colloquially what people are referring to them as. So the super shoes, or if you were going to look this up, scientific publications now refer to them as AFT, or
Okay.
advanced footwear technology, is a different term. also to refer to them.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. So, you sort of mentioned earlier sort of the evolution of how things have gone in the last few years. And I remember there was not too long ago, it was the polar opposite, right? It was sort of minimalist, barefoot, largely I think the catalyst was that book Born to Run. And now it's gone completely to the other side of the spectrum. Maybe if you could discuss this transition from one extreme to the other, and is there any I'm trying to think of the best word, maybe for lack of a better word, science to say, okay, here's why it's gone this direction, and maybe why, minimalist barefoot isn't such a trend anymore.
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons why. I mean, of course, with minimalist and barefoot shoes, they work for some people, but they don't work for a lot of people, especially newer runners wanting to get into running, people running a lot. It's a lot of load on your body. And another reason why it was so popular was because, again, weight is so important in a running shoe. If we're talking about a race or we're talking about if you want to run really fast, 100 grams is about 1% running economy. So the weight is very important for how efficient the shoe can make you. So one reason why we also went down in stack height was because we don't want really heavy shoes to run in. And so now with the lighter foams, what we're seeing is like we don't have to compromise anymore on that lower stack. We can go higher without the weight savings. And we're also seeing that cushioning benefits running economy too. So trying to run
Hmm,
fast, we know that these foams are making you more efficient. Um, so yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think, cushioning, I think especially for people that want to start running, these more cushioned shoes are a bit easier. You can run more, you have less load on your body, a bit safer. Um, and then if you want to run faster, the science now shows that these super shoes are significantly more efficient than some of the earlier shoes.
gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, because I remember when they first came out, there was all the people that were sort of minimalist fans of minimalist. They're like, oh, well, this is going to absorb all your energy, and almost the opposite. Versus, it sounds like it's actually not true. And I remember the first time I ran, and I think it was Hoka's. I ran just in regular shoes, and I remember trying them just like the first few strides. I'm like, oh, this feels so good. It was like nice and squishy, and it was just more comfortable.
Yeah, it's become more comfortable and more fun, kind of to your point, right? Like it's more fun. And I think for the vast majority of runners out there just want to feel good and have fun when they go for a run. So I think that's also why it's become popular is that, it has that springiness to running in and it's yeah, absorbing your energy, but also it's not taking it all from you. So yeah,
Gotcha.
a more enjoyable ride.
Yeah, for sure. So you had mentioned earlier those three different components of super shoes. Is there any one component, again, like you said, they all kind of have to exist together or else it doesn't work. But if you had to pull out one of those and say, okay, this is the one that is the most influential to performance or comfort, or maybe those are two different things, what might that be?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a tricky question because I mentioned those three components, but because they're so intertwined, we don't actually know independently how those things function without each other because we
Got it.
can't really do them without each other. We did a study back, I guess in 2021 now, where we actually took an old Nike Vaporfly and we cut the plate because we were trying to see
Hmm,
if we made it really flexible, was the stiffness of the plate important? And really surprised that we found that the running economy was actually really similar between the flexible
interesting.
shoe and the stiff shoe.
Okay.
People were running about 7-minute mile pace, so I think that's a little bit important to keep in mind. And also the plate was still in the shoe, so it's flexible, but there could be other roles of the plate. Um, so I
Okay.
guess to answer your question, I think the foams have been the largest kind of revolution, and we see that the foams are contributing a lot to how efficient people are um, and comfort as well. I think the plates work with the foams because these foams are getting, as I said, they need to be really compliant, so they're getting really soft. And I think that the plates play more of a stabilizing role and a
Mm.
compression roll that we don't always think about. We think about the plates just being stiff for push off. But when we step down on that plate, it's evenly distributing the pressure under our foot. So I think there's other roles that the plate plays. Um, but in general, if I just had to pick one, I would say the foam.
Okay, gotcha. Um, So one of the things I remember first hearing when Hoka came out was that, oh my God, it's like what is it like to run around a turn on these things? Like, are they unstable? Because, certainly if you run, with a normal shoe or a minimalist shoe, like, you're right there on the ground. Is there anything like any issue with stability now with the current, over cushion shoes or super shoes, or is the technology such in these shoes that that's not really a thing?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's okay. That's definitely something that when we're designing and testing the tall stock height shoes that we really pay attention to because I think it could very well be a concern if they're not designed well. Um, again, having really soft foam at those stocks, you could just imagine how they become unstable.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times we go towards wider shoes. That's why there will be a lot
Uh,
wider on the bottom to account for kind of that stability, giving a wide base of support. Um, so yeah, I find that that's something we make sure we design for and we're testing. We often use eversion velocity um, or, how fast the acceleration is of our center of pressure to make sure
hmm,
that, they're not creating really like wobbly shoes. But each shoe is going to be a bit different, I guess, also.
okay. I saw I think it was like a week ago. I saw that Nike came out with a new one. And it literally looked like the sole was like I don't even know how many. It was crazy looking. I'm like, oh my God, like you could just grow like 3 or 4 inches just by putting these things on.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think that's the topic that's becoming the question in the industry. For race day shoes for our professional athletes, World Athletics has limited the stack height to 40 millimeters. So
Oh, okay.
race day shoes, if you want it to be World Athletics legal, if that's important to you, need to be under 40 millimeters. So that's kind
Okay.
of capped, so we can work within that. Um,
Gotcha.
but how that limit was determined is, there's not really a strong reason why it's 40.
Hmm.
So now a lot of the research is saying, what if we go taller? Is there a like metabolic benefit for like a race day shoe? We don't really know because you do start to trade off stability and weight for, the cushioning. So I'm going to be curious to see where it goes in the next few years. I think for those trainers, the super trainer category that are above 40, we're starting to see 50 even. Um,
Okay.
I think it's going to be self-limiting for that stability reason because there's going to become a point where, yeah, it's just not stable anymore.
Right. So is that again, I'm not sure if this is something you can discuss, but is this something that you guys do in the lab then? You'll like, kind of try different shoes, maybe with the same individual and do like, VO2 max or lactate or whatever, just to kind of see, that metabolic efficiency with if it goes up or down with different shoes, different stack heights.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I think of ourselves like chefs. Like we have the ingredients, we know the foam and the plate, but we're trying to figure out how those work together and kind of the
Hmm.
best recipe of those that are going to work. And our projects depend on, what our goal is. So sometimes it's to make the fastest shoe, and sometimes it's to make a shoe that's great for like a long run. Depends on what we're looking at. But yeah, we'll take different stack heights, different diameters of foam, and try and figure out how that affects the runner.
Gotcha. It's a great analogy. I like the cook analogy. Um, So again, without maybe giving away any proprietary information, what are some of the key considerations that go into making maybe just any shoe, but maybe specifically super shoes? I know you sort of alluded to this just a second ago as well as earlier, but anything that you guys really have to consider, maybe the top of that pyramid that when you guys are, or maybe I guess the bottom of the pyramid when you guys are looking at designing a super shoe.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that usually happens is we work with our materials people on our team.
Okay.
as I mentioned, the foam is so important and the foam is evolving very, very fast.
Okay.
Um, Different material, I said used to be PIBA. Now we're using an aliphatic TPU, which is just a different raw material, but the way that we're like getting these new materials and realizing their benefits is very fast. And I'm
Okay.
not part of that team. But when they come to you with new materials, it's really exciting because that kind of gives us a new thing. So we're usually starting with the new materials. We're doing mechanical tests on the materials. So how much does it deform? How much does it return energy? Another thing that's really important is its resiliency over time. So, after 2 hours of impact test, is the foam giving you the same properties than it did at the start? Because if you're a
Hmm.
marathoner, ultra marathoner, and you're running in that shoe for, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, it's important that the behavior of it is the same. So always starting with the foam. Um, and then, yeah, we're doing a lot of interesting new techniques where we're using existing runners' biomechanics in the lab. So we're looking at their pressure maps, we're looking at their forces, their biomechanics, and using that in computer simulations actually to start to optimize where we can lose weight, how we can optimize the ride, um,
Hmm.
and things like that. So it gets complicated, but I would say the things that we're usually optimizing for are weight is really big, and ride. So kind of that heel to toe transition or midfoot to toe, or for forefoot strikers, just that toe. Um, but how can we make sure that the geometry of the shoe is such that people are getting a very efficient stride?
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. There's so many variables, right, that go into this. And you're, I guess, trying to make it so that, obviously, I'm sure some shoes work better for certain people than others for with all those variables being considered. But yeah, it must be a fascinating job to try to kind of hit it right down the middle, right? Where like everyone kind of gets a really positive experience for with the exact same shoe.
Definitely. And that's the hardest part is that, we need to take into account our pro marathoners that are running in the shoe, but also, people that are going to be running maybe 4 hour marathons in the shoe or all sorts of different things. And then for our everyday shoes, a wide range of people doing all sorts of different things in the shoe. And I think that's sort of also where the consumer's also getting a lot smarter too, is like what shoe's going to work best for me and
Hmm.
my stride and my pace. Um, is a lot of also what I think we're starting to drill down into is a shoe's becoming almost like a prescription
Yeah.
for different people.
Interesting. Yeah, because like you would say, like I wouldn't say, okay, I'm gonna do the same training program as Kipchoge. I'm gonna try to, break 2 hours in the marathon.
Yeah.
Do you find, like my background is I ran track in college and stuff, and but I mostly am a cyclist, and it's so interesting. Like all these cyclists want to buy the same bike as the pros, but yet they know they can't train the same because, well, they'd probably die. But
Yeah.
do you find that we're like, oh my God, this pro, Emily Sisson wore this shoe, therefore I'm going to buy it? Or do you find that people are like, oh my gosh, okay, that's a shoe for those people, for these elites. I'm going to buy this shoe. Or is it kind of a mixed bag?
No, I think it's definitely a mixed bag. I think people often look to who's winning
Okay.
um, the marathon to shoot a buy. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if you're, for most people we see. I think the original 4% study, looked at paces from 12 to 16 kilometers an hour, which is 8 to 6 miles, minute miles. So quite a wide range. And they found the same savings
Okay.
between those paces. Um, we do a lot at different paces as well. And we find that generally the savings are consistent across paces. I think from
Interesting.
8, maybe even 8.5 upwards, we see, pretty similar savings. Of course, that's still a fast pace for a lot of people. I think when
Sure.
we start to talk about, like, there's been some research that's also shown, I don't know if I think 10-minute miles, I don't know if they went lower, but they saw that you still had savings in super shoes at slower paces. It wasn't quite as much. Like the magnitude was maybe a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Um, but they still worked. And I think we have seen that as well, is that there are still savings at those paces. It's just maybe a little bit less than
Okay.
at faster paces.
Gotcha. So with the super shoes, kind of what you just said, it sounds like regardless if I'm a 12-minute miler or a 4-minute miler, I'm going to see some performance advantages there. Price aside, are there any reasons why a runner wouldn't want to purchase a pair of super shoes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I would say for like I would say no. I would say there's not a reason why not to
Okay.
buy a super shoe and to race in a super shoe.
Okay.
I don't think that means to run in them all the time.
Okay.
But I think if you had a race and you felt good in the super shoe, yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't like be able to race in it.
Okay. And so that's a good question about, because I think that's a question a lot of people have. Should I also train in
Yeah.
super shoes or should I just race in them and run in something different? Is What is dry like, for those people that say you shouldn't also train in a super shoe? Is it because of that? Okay, these are really expensive shoes, and then you're gonna have to just keep buying more expensive shoes, or is there another reason that maybe they're just not as good to train in, and you'd be better off just using those for race day shoes? Is there any sort of science or just information in that area?
Yeah, I think so. Relatively speaking, in terms of like the published literature, their super shoes are new, so I don't know of anything published that's, pointing to why you shouldn't train in super shoes. Um, from my kind of knowledge and just my opinion more so, I think people tend to change. I mean, yes, super shoes tend to have a shorter lifespan. We say they're built like F1 cars. They're not built to last a long
Hmm.
time. They're built to be as minimal, as light as possible, and to go really fast. So you're going to be spending a lot of money if you only, um, but yeah, I think there's a few other reasons. Your biomechanics do slightly change with and without a carbon fiber plate. The work shifts a bit more from your ankle to your knee, um, with a carbon fiber plate. So having a few different shoes in your rotation, I think, tends to allow you just to have just work different muscles at different times. Um,
Okay.
but that being said, I think the other anecdotal stuff I will say is that you can run more in super shoes, meaning
Hmm.
that, you can run maybe faster or be a bit less beat up after your runs. And so maybe that's good for you. Maybe you want to be running more. And you're still working all those muscles and you're actually working them more because you can run more. So I
Right.
see both sides of it. Um, but yeah, I think different shoes for different purposes tends to work well for most people.
Okay. Um, so you mentioned, because super shoes are pretty new, there's not a ton of research out there, just like maybe with anything in terms of super shoes. That being said, is there any research out there that show that super shoes as a whole, increase, decrease, kind of keep it the same as far as injury rate? Obviously, there's a million factors, like you said, if someone increases their volume because they're running the super shoes, maybe it's the volume, it's not the shoes. But I didn't know if there was anything out there like that, any data.
Yeah, I can only really think of one case study. Oh, I don't want to get this wrong. I think it was like navicular stress fractures, I believe is what they looked at.
Hmm.
Um, and they found maybe a slight increase. I think that's as you said, I think that's very difficult, especially when it's a case study.
Yeah.
Running is people, if you don't want to get injured, then I guess don't run. Like that's a bit of a difficult thing, which of course is not the answer. Um, so yeah, I don't think we have enough data. I don't think we have long enough term studies or controlled. You need really long controlled studies to start to look at injury because there's so many factors. So I think as of now, we don't can't point to one singular thing. Maybe different people have different experiences, but as a whole, um, I don't think there's anything showing that they cause a certain type of injury.
Okay, gotcha. Um, so aside from the usual fit recommendations of shoes, are there like if I'm going to go out and try on, I've always just running quote unquote, regular shoes. I want to go out and try to buy some super shoes. Are there any other considerations other than the usual fit guidelines that any runner would use for any shoes that runners need to be aware of?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think again, consider your maybe pace and what you plan on using the shoe for.
Okay,
I mean, I can speak to what I've worked on. So Puma's line, we have our top race day shoe, the Fast Star, which is our most aggressive and stiffest shoe. That is going to work best for those faster paces, for those faster runners. Um, as I said, we do see savings across the board, but maybe if you're looking for something more comfortable. You're going to be on your feet for a lot longer in a race. Look for something that's maybe a little bit less aggressive. So we have, in our line, that would be either the Deviate Elite or the Deviate. Um, a lot of these shoes, like for example, the Deviate versus the Deviate Elite for us, our Deviate Elite has a carbon fiber plate, and our Deviate has just a TPU plate in it. So it's not as stiff, which I think works
hmm,
well again, sort of at those paces that maybe aren't as fast. Um, so yeah, I would say, I guess, consider your pace, do your research. I mean, every brand, I think, has kind of these different tiers. And then the other thing I would say would be to try and run in the shoe, right? I think putting on a shoe is one thing, but a big part of these shoes is, as I said, the cushioning and the ride. And that's going to feel different for everyone depending on their stride. So if you can get, if your running store has like a treadmill or something, you can try out the shoe with. Um, I would suggest doing that and not just putting it on because it can start to feel a lot different once you start to run.
gotcha. Yeah, you had made that analogy sort of with the super shoes with being Formula One, and Formula One cars handle best and do the best when they're going like a million miles an hour, not when they're going 20. Is that similar to super shoes where, like you said, there's always a benefit, but runners tend to see the most benefit from all that enhancement of all the work that you guys are doing in the lab at faster paces typically?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think yes, but also not, it doesn't always have to be, like 5-minute miles. I think,
Okay,
as I said, we see similar paces, 7-minute miles, see very similar is like a lot of times what we're testing at 8-minute
okay,
miles, 7, 6 in that range. Um, so I'd say within that range, you're seeing a good benefit. And then as you start to go, slower than that, there's still like you're still going to get a benefit over your, old daily trainer that doesn't have a super foam in it. You're still going to get a good benefit. It's hard to say whether it'll be the same. It's also so individualized, I think, is the
yeah,
difficult thing. Different models, different shoes, a lot of studies published show the range of what, even people going the same speed, how they will respond. I think there's started some research talks about responders and non-responders and people that maybe respond better to one than the other. Um, there's not really unfortunately, for people buying shoes, there's not like a very good explanation for that yet. So there's nothing that we can like point to that say, if you do this, you should buy this shoe. Um, but yeah, I would say it's kind of individualized.
okay. And one question I didn't have on this, how does body weight impact this? Like if I'm, a 225-pound runner and I buy this super shoe and then I lose 100 pounds and now I weigh 125 and I still run in the same shoe. Am I going to have what type of performance changes should I be looking for, or what might there be based on the body weight of the runner?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have I haven't tested someone, I guess, before and after um, that kind of scenario, but I would say depending on, like, kind of my hypothesis would be depending on your weight, that's where the foam density is going to come into play.
Okay.
Um, if you're running in a shoe and you're feeling like we call like bottoming out, like shoes are becoming softer and softer. So potentially you might start to bottom out. But yeah, so if you're feeling that, then you could go towards a shoe with a firmer foam,
Okay.
would probably be better for you. Um, but I don't think there would necessarily be, from a shoe perspective, I don't think there would be a huge difference in the effect of the shoe. I think the effect of the shoe should be pretty similar.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I've always been interested in that. I'm like, how does the body weight affect this, with the compression of the foam and all that kind of stuff? Um,
Yeah.
so last question, what's the coolest part of your job? Like I said, someone who's just, really interested in biomechanics, but not obviously doing what you do professionally. To me, if I were coming out of, undergrad or grad school right now, if I could pick any job, like what you're doing seems to be the dream job where you get to do all these cool things. But is there one or two things about your job that you think this is like the coolest thing ever?
Yeah, I think there's a few. There's a few. I mean, I biased. I do really like my job. Um, there's a few cool things. I think the one thing that's really fun that we get to do is work with our elite athletes. So,
Mm,
working with that top 1%, whether it be on the road or especially in track and field, because those guys are just built different. They
yeah.
we we don't get to typically test the general population of track and field athletes is generally different than our Olympians. So that's pretty fun to get to work with them and see some of their data. Um, it's very unique, so that's always fun. And then I would say in general, we work for a long time on these shoes and we test lots of people. Um, but to get to see it kind of out in the real world, I was watching the Chicago Marathon this weekend, and the Fast R3 is something we've been working on for so long, and we
Mm,
were so excited in the lab about the results. Um, and then seeing actual people, out there wearing it and doing well, I think that's kind of always, I really like the applied part
yeah.
of my job. I spend a long time in the lab and looking at numbers and all of that stuff, but getting to see it actually come to life on a product out on consumers is pretty fun.
Yeah. That's very cool. Kind of like, I guess it sort of justifies all that hard
Yeah.
work you guys are doing in the lab over however many, whatever the time span of that is, to see someone actually not just perform, but perform well on like the biggest stage.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
That is awesome. Well, Laura, thank you so much for your time on this. This has been great. Again, I don't think I know that this will be really valuable because I mean, I've certainly learned a lot. I feel like I didn't even know the difference between a super shoe and an over cushion shoe. So this is great. For our listeners, please check out puma.com. Laura referred to some of the models of the different shoes, so you can go on there and check that out. If anyone is interested in a USCA coach certification, you can use the code ATE75 for $75 off. So, Laura, thank you so much. I wish you continued success in your role at Puma. And yeah, thanks again for the great chat.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.